Hi, this is Jim McConnell. Thanks for joining me. We're going to let a few more people kind of hop on and make sure that we are good to go. I'm waiting for Olivia is behind the camera today. So
hello, everyone.
We'll see what she has to say, and when she gives me the thumbs up to get going, we're going to start out.
Awesome. All right, we've got some people hopping on here.
Hello.
Awesome. All right, I think we're good to go ahead and kick it off.
Good to go?
Yes,
right.
Let's do it.
So, I'm Jim McConnell, head chemist, co-owner of Light Elegance Nail Products, McConnell Labs, degree in chemistry, a couple of minors, and minors in like biology, math, physics. So we've been doing this now for about 23 years. Hopefully you guys know who I am. If you don't, welcome. And we are going to talk today about allergies. What's the origin of an allergy? A lot of times people wind up being allergic, it seems like, to HEMA. So HEMA or 2-hydroxyethyl methacrylate. And that is a monomer that's typically used in acrylic liquids. And it's also used in a lot of gel polishes and a lot of building gels. Why people might put, or manufacturers may put HEMA into their product is because it's relatively affordable. It has also very good adhesion properties, and at lower concentrations, it cures well. Higher concentrations, it seems like it has a little bit more difficulty curing. HEMA is what we call monofunctional, meaning it only has one reactive group, it doesn't have two. So we tend to use like difunctional monomers because they help bridge or help chain extend the reaction to get you a better polymer. The monofunctional gives us some really good adhesion properties, and it also is a chain terminator, so it stops the chain from growing too large. If the chain grows too large, it can become a little bit unruly, or it can also become harder to break down and soak off. So if you're looking for a gel polish or a soak off building gel, then oftentimes higher concentrations of monofunctional monomers are used. Usually that's going to be okay. It's just when those concentrations exceed certain percentages. So if you look at an ingredient list, oftentimes if you're looking at the back of the bottle, or if a manufacturer supplies you with an SDS, those ingredient lists will say things like 2-HEMA, which is the HEMA, or it might say 2-HPMA, which is hydroxypropyl methacrylate, which is akin to the HEMA, but it's one carbon atom larger. The differences between those two are similar to using MMA, so methyl methacrylate, in acrylic liquid versus ethyl methacrylate in acrylic liquid. MMA, as we know, causes a lot of allergies. It produces something that's a lot harder to soak off as well. But the finished polymer is a lot harder. EMA produces a polymer that winds up being a little bit softer and easier to soak off. Similar things can be attributed to the difference between HEMA and HPMA. If you look at the ingredient list, going back to that, if you see something that says dihema and it is followed by a long chemical name, those are chemicals or ingredients that the HEMA is bound to the oligomer. So that's the name of the oligomer. The oligomer starts off with usually a polyol. The polyol is then terminated with an isocyanate, and the isocyanate is then terminated with either HEMA, EMA, HPA, or HPMA. So you'll see that bis HEMA or bis HPMA followed by the oligomer name, and usually is included someplace in there is a type of isocyanate that was used to build that product. If you just see 2-HEMA followed by a comma behind it, that's HEMA monomer. And the HEMA monomer winds up being the difficult part, because if that concentration is very, very high, then typically people might wind up getting allergic reactions to it. In some of our testing that we do in our R&D lab, what we've been able to reveal is that some manufacturers are putting other ingredients into some of these products that are on the market. Those other ingredients might also help those products adhere better to the fingernail, and in some cases allow the unreacted monomers to pass through the fingernail and come in contact with the subdermal layer beneath the fingernail, what we call our nail bed. And In those cases, what we're trying to do is identify what those products are and bring to light those effects. So that's one of the things that we're working on in the R&D lab. The other thing that's important to note is that if you wind up showing that you have an allergy to a product and you just started using that product, you may actually have an allergy to something that you used before. That other product, say brand A, was the one that you were using previously, and then you started showing an allergic reaction, but you didn't notice it yet, or it didn't present itself. But in brand B, when you switched over to that other brand, that's when the allergy showed up. So if the two products contain similar amounts of allergens, the initial exposure and subsequent exposure to the second brand, that's when it shows up. So anything that contains those, it winds up being of question. And you really need to find out, it's not necessarily the brand, it's the ingredient that's important here. So maybe the difference between brand A and brand B is that brand A used less photoinitiator and used a less powerful curing light, and brand B uses more photoinitiator and maybe a more powerful curing light. But between the two of them, you started developing the allergy to brand A, but brand B is when it actually showed up. So all of these things they're complex, and ultimately it winds up coming down to what are you exposing yourself to and what's the effect of that exposure to your allergy and what's developing that allergy. So we need to make sure that when we take a look at these things, it's a fairly complex situation, and there's no easy way to ascertain what precisely you are allergic to without going to a physician. And they can do a skin patch test or a RIP test, which is a repeat insulated insult test. And so if you do those things, you can find out what the actual ingredient is and then stop using that. Our bodies are different. Everybody is different. And how we react to certain things that we're exposed to winds up being significant. So for me, my body reacts to beef. I can't have beef. And so does it mean that beef is bad? Absolutely not. Most people can eat beef and be totally great with it. It's just not for me. And so perhaps the products that you're being exposed to, if you develop an allergy to it, we need to identify which raw material in that product you're allergic to, and then with that product that you find out what you're allergic to, find other products that don't contain that, and you'll probably be just fine, maybe even for the rest of your life, without showing any allergy at all.
We do have a question about HEMA.
Yeah.
Marta asks, is HEMA considered a low quality ingredient, or is it a good choice when in low percentages?
For me, I think HEMA is a fine ingredient, as long as if it were my product that I was formulating, I wouldn't put it in over a certain percentage. And I think that threshold is somewhere between 12 and 15%. That's my personal opinion as a formulating chemist. But very good question. I wouldn't call it a low quality ingredient, it's just a lower priced ingredient. HEMA is less expensive to us than the HPMA is. But we choose HPMA, even though they're very similar in structure. We choose HPMA because it's less commonly used, and I have seen very few people that show an allergy to it.
Awesome. Let's see, we do have another question here.
Yeah.
I found LE because of gel allergies. I would love to see a how to read SDS on a future Chemist Corner.
Okay.
This is one we've been planning for a while.
We've been planning it for years, and I've got a microphone sitting on my desk. I just need to sit down and get it done. So we'll go over a screen recording when I do it, and I will actually highlight an initial SDS and what each section means, and then I'll go through and analyze maybe like the first 4 sections of an SDS with you guys, the second 4 sections, the third 4 sections, and the fourth or last 4 sections of an SDS, so you know exactly what pertinent information applies to you and what information on an SDS may not apply to you.
Awesome. So stay tuned, everyone. That
Yeah.
was coming soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think another thing that I'll point out during that time is maybe I'll highlight a couple SDSs where they're clearly wrong. The ingredients, how do you know if the SDS is going to be accurate or inaccurate? There are a few glaring instances where they're clearly not the proper SDS for the product that's actually in the bottle. And I'll point some of those things out as well.
Awesome. We do have another question. They're all
Yep.
rolling in now.
Oh, good.
Does it make a difference when you test the cure thickness on a nail form versus a natural colored nail swatch tip? Some people get their gels to cure fine on a top, but not on a nail form backing.
Right, so on the tips, or I like to use tongue depressors. So you can use a glue-on tip, you can use a tongue depressor, and some of the products that are on the market right now do cure better on something solid versus on a form. Or if you put those things on a form but you have a different gel, like a thin gel layer underneath it, maybe a base coat, maybe a priming coat, maybe the same product that you're putting a larger building volume onto the nail, but you put it down as a thin coat first and put another coat up on top. And so, yeah, there are some differences, and it's something I haven't been able to quite discover exactly why, other than maybe there's something that's the release product on the form that's inhibiting the through cure of the builder coat. So yeah, there's a lot of things, but there are differences. And so making sure that you test in a few different situations is crucial. Oftentimes those products are the ones that really have great adhesion to the fingernail, but you just need to make sure that you're testing it in the proper application.
Perfect.
Yeah. And that's true with pigmented or clear products, which is really kind of anomalous.
Awesome. Let's see. You can keep going. I'm just going to sort through
rolling.
These questions here.
So one of the things that I think is important to note is Olivia has pointed out a couple of other questions that we had earlier that people have been asking about. Some of those questions might be, are we ever going to come out with like an acryl gel or a polygel type material? Probably not. The reason why is because while there are some distinct characteristics of those that really have some great attributes, it just doesn't fall within what we feel like is our strength. And the other problem, I think, with some of them is if you use anything to help shape that polygel once you put it on the nail, and if that shaping process involves a solvent, and if you use that, it flushes some of the resins right out of the polygel and onto your skin, and those things can develop allergies. So we want to avoid those wherever we can. Olivia, were some other questions that you had?
We had some questions about mixing brands of products. Can you still get the same wear? What are your recommendations there?
So right now, we're actually in the R&D lab. We're testing various brands of products in various curing lights. And if we take a look at, we have the ability to measure the actual emittance or irradiance values at every wavelength, so from 200 nanometers to 800 nanometers. So at 200, 201, 202, 203, all the way up to 800. And we can measure the actual irradiance value. So what is the curing watts per square centimeter, measured in milliwatts per square centimeter. And then we're measuring all of these lights with that piece of equipment. And then Doug Schoen has developed this really cool piece of equipment as well, which actually measures the exothermic reaction of the gel compared to the temperature inside the light. And that's called the differential exothermic reaction. And so we can measure that differential there, and it takes 50 samples, sample readings every second. And so when we do this, we accumulate a ton of data. And then we're figuring out the best way to determine whether, if brand A suggests brand A's curing light, how well does it cure in that light? What's the emittance or radiance values of that curing light compared to other curing lights? And then once we compare it, what's the differential reaction of brand A in brand A's curing light? And then take brand A's curing light out of the equation and put in one that has a much higher irradiance value at the same wavelengths, and see if we get another differential reaction taking place, exothermic reaction taking place with the gel curing in maybe brand B's curing light, to see what happens there, and if brand A's product cured completely in brand A's curing light that they recommend. So we're gathering a lot of this information so that we know obviously how many different brands of products and gels are on the market right now. When we first started, there was like 7, and now we have hundreds, right? And so since we have all of those different gels and we have all of these different curing lights, and then curing lights come out and are launched on a regular basis, we can't keep up with all of it. But we can give you a general idea with data at some point here in the next couple of weeks, whether the products cure well under certain conditions. And we'll try and publish something with the Chemist Corner, revealing more of that data, not specific to, we're not going to identify, which brand A is, what is that product versus brand B versus brand C, but we'll get you some good, valuable information.
Amazing.
It's not going to be done to try and discount what people are doing, but it's good data to figure out maybe why some of these allergies are taking place, okay? And then if we see anything that is of concern, we will actually contact those companies and say, hey, this is what we saw, and maybe this is something that we can take a look at together and help you resolve the issue. So we'll keep that separate from public knowledge.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Let's see. So several companies are using Acrylates copolymer as a main ingredient on their SDS sheets. I feel like they are hiding things.
Nope, Acrylates copolymer is actually a resin. We could take a look at acrylic powder and think that acrylic powder is similar to an Acrylates copolymer. Acrylates copolymer come in a lot of different forms, and basically what it is you're taking various acrylate monomers and reacting them in one batch, all as a mixture. So that's the reason why it's acrylates, and it's all forming a copolymer product. Copolymer can be 2 or more acrylate oligomers being reacted all at the same time. We can blend which monomers we use to make an acrylates copolymer to give us adhesion, to give us hardness, to give us scratch resistance, to give us clarity, to give us rubberized feel. And so that's what the acrylates copolymer is. Acrylates copolymer typically is used or was used in a lot of like thermoset adhesives, hot melt glues, nail polish. So when people use nitrocellulose in nail polish, acrylates copolymer is typically one of the more common ingredients used in nail polish instead of nitrocellulose. Nitrocellulose itself turns yellow and is extremely brittle. Acrylates copolymer, you can add flexibility to something that performs similar to a nitrocellulose, but it doesn't have the yellowing factor. So acrylates copolymer has been in our beauty industry for a very, very long time. You spray acrylates copolymer if you put any kind of fixative in your hair on a daily basis. So if you spray on some sort of hairspray or you use a styling mousse, acrylates copolymer is what's being used. So that's really common. It's quite safe because it is a fully reacted polymer. And so you dissolve that in either a solvent or you dissolve it in monomer, and then you add other components to it to get it to react properly.
Great information, thank you.
Yeah, so those ingredients are accurate. Now let's say if you take a look at an SDS and the SDS says ethyl acetate followed by acrylates copolymer followed by some pigments and maybe a photoinitiator, there's nothing in that formulation that requires the use of a photoinitiator. So if you're looking at SDS or an ingredient list and those are the ingredients that you're seeing, then you know that the ingredient list isn't accurate for the product that you're actually using. And I'll highlight that when I do my SDS Chemist Corners.
Perfect. We do have another question here about lamps.
Yep.
Leslie mentioned that lamps need to be replaced after 2 to 3 years. I know the answer, but the expert response would be awesome to hear.
So when I've got a lamp right here. I don't recommend this lamp, but the LEDs over a period of time reduce the irradiance value. And so when the irradiance value starts to drop, that's when you need to really replace it. At what point does the lamp need to be replaced based on the usage of those LEDs? For our LED dot Gen 2 or LED dot Gen 3, if the accumulated irradiance value drops from 36 to 24 milliwatts per square centimeter, that's when we start looking at it's time to replace it. When it gets to 18, it's definitely time to replace it. So that's our comfort level because we've done a fair amount of testing on that. Some of these lamps, when we get them brand new, they start off at 14, 16 milliwatts per square centimeter and accumulated irradiance values. And so those really wouldn't work well to cure our gel. Now they may work well to cure other gels, but they wouldn't work well to cure ours. So we need to make sure that we have that information. That's what we use. Now, how long does it take to go from, say, 36 down to 18? It depends upon how often you use the light, the quality of the LEDs that were used, as well as the electricity supply. All of those will affect how long the LEDs will last. And when we take a look at all of that information, I can't really give you a good solid answer other than we can measure that for you. So if you send a light in, we could actually measure it and tell you, yeah, your light needs to be replaced. So if you bought, like if you have a LED dot Gen 3 and you've had it for a year and you're curious whether it's still good or not, you can send it back to us and we'll test it for you and get it back to you.
Very cool.
So that's the general response with a little bit more detail. If you're a nail technician, you've been doing gel 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you're fully booked, after about 2 years, it's a good time to look at changing out your light. If you take a look at how well, say, the Light Elegance gel cures over a form, and you do a cure thickness test, and let's say, for me, I always do it with Perfect White. If I take a look at the cure thickness of the Perfect White, and it's 24 thousandths of an inch when I first get it, when I first get the light, and I save that small container of Perfect White, and I test that light every 3 months, and I put it on the form, I cure it up, I mark the place inside the light where I'm always going to test that sample, because if you have an area, say, where there are no lights, LEDs, and you put that sample underneath that area, you're not going to get good exposure. If you put it off the side, where it's closer to the LEDs, you get a thicker exposure. Thicker, more intense light, and the irradiance over here is higher than it is here in the middle. And so over there, that's where you want to always test it, so it's always the same location. And so if you do that every 3 months, you'll see over a period of a couple of years, a slight decrease in the overall cure thickness of the product. If you go from 24 thousandths of an inch initially when you get the light when it's new, and it goes down to, say, 14 thousandths, you know it's about time to replace that light. So there are ways that you can go ahead and do the testing. If you go online to Amazon or you go over to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can get a digital micrometer that measures to the 10,000ths of an inch. So 5/10,000ths of an inch is the one that you want to get. It's going to cost you anywhere between $20 and $35. And then just keep record in a notebook. And then you just monitor how well your light's curing. The whole test takes like 3 minutes. So it's a good way to go. And then you can go ahead and evaluate it on your own.
Awesome.
Okay.
We have another question here, back to kind of the allergy conversation.
Yep.
Can we apply buttercream directly onto the inhibition layer of Jimmy Gel or Lexiline, or could this cause uncured product?
It won't cause uncured product, but sometimes if you apply it over, say, Jimmy Gel or Lexiline gels, the little slip layer, the sticky layer that happens to be there, what we call the inhibition layer, because the oxygen in the air inhibits it from curing to a tack-free finish. If you take a look at that inhibition layer, sometimes if you put a buttercream on top of it, it can slip around a little bit. So you can either cleanse it, you can file it after cleansing, or you can just dry wipe it and remove any uncured sticky layer. It doesn't have to be all the way off, as long as it's just tacky, you're good to go.
Awesome.
So you can test it and you'll be all right.
Great. Let's see here. Lots of questions coming through.
Okay.
Is a rubber base coat basically just a flexible soak-off builder with adhesive ingredients?
Usually they're not even flexible. Usually they're quite brittle. Oftentimes they contain high concentration of monomers, which give it better adhesion to the fingernail. And that's kind of the bottom line. I've only seen a few rubber bases that are actually rubbery once they've been cured. So, but most of them really have high concentrations of monomers. Good adhesion monomers, but monomers.
All right. Can you please explain why cat eye gels are a no-no? And are there any ways to do them safely?
Cat eye gels are totally fine. Those cat eye gels the cat eye product is an iron-based pigment. And some of those iron-based pigments have other coloring pigments deposited on the surface of them. So when you expose those iron-based pigments to a magnet, it orients that iron-based pigment so that you get various color effects. Perfectly safe to use and legal, totally legal according to the EU and the USDA or the FDA here in the United States. We just don't do them because, to tell you the truth, I personally don't find them attractive, and some people just kind of fades in, fades out. Sometimes at one point when they first were launched, they were popular for about 3 to 6 months. And by the time you finally hop on board, you get your samples and the fad's gone. And so we never really ventured into that. So again, perfectly safe, not a problem with it. And the effect can be pretty spectacular in some cases, especially with these cat eye pigments that are going into the gels that have colorants deposited on the outside.
All right. Can you touch on using gel in an airbrush for nail art?
This has become one of my biggest pet peeves. And the reason why is because gels contain acrylates. Acrylates are chemicals that you want to reduce exposure, skin exposure to. And what is some of the most sensitive tissue in the human body? Your lungs. And so if you're airbrushing, taking a gel, letting it down with a solvent, and then you are going to spray it through an airbrush, that overspray, so any kind of atomized gel with solvent that doesn't adhere to the fingernail, is being exposed and you're inhaling it if it doesn't hit some other surface first. And I would not personally want to get that material into my lungs in any shape or form. It is probably the most dangerous trend in our industry right now. And I've heard about it, I haven't seen it, but whoever sees that really should avoid doing that at all costs. Because if you don't, you will eventually regret it.
All right, we've got a request for private chemistry classes. As an educator, I love sharing the right knowledge and would love to improve it, and learning from you would be awesome.
Give me a phone call.
Awesome. Let's see what else we got here. Is glow-in-the-dark and neon pigments safe in gel products?
Glow-in-the-dark and neon pigments safe in gel products. It depends upon the type of pigment that's being used to create the neon effect. Glow-in-the-dark, yeah, those are fine. A lot of the FDA and EU approved glow-in-the-dark additives that we can use are perfectly safe. However, they don't really glow very brightly. At least I haven't found any that do. But it doesn't mean that you can't increase the concentration and make them really cool. Neon pigments are typically, as the true neons go, not approved for use in cosmetics. There are ways to formulate around those issues, and they can still appear to be quite neon. And so if we add the glow-in-the-dark or optical brightener, so you can put an optical brightener in that makes it glow under black light. And so if you put an optical brightener in with FDA approved or EU approved cosmetic pigments, then you're going to be fine, and it's going to look kind of like a neon. So there are ways to do it safely, but if it's a true neon pigment, you're not supposed to use it. Does that mean that it's not safe? I don't think so. I think that the FDA and the EU have missed the mark on this. Reason why is because those pigments, even though they may not be considered to be safe, as an actual individual pigment, we are binding these things into plastic substrates. And so you don't have any free pigment that's going to be floating around, can be ingested. Even our stomach acids would have trouble breaking down a cured plastic and getting the pigment exposed through your digestive system to your bloodstream and cause a problem. So that's my personal opinion as a chemist. Again, I may be wrong. But in this case, I don't think so. I think that you're going to be fine, even if it's, according to the government agencies, not a good idea or illegal. I think that you're still going to be perfectly safe.
Great. Would you ever consider coming to the UK to do a chemistry class?
Yes, I would. I would be happy to.
Very cool. All right, keep sending in your questions, everyone. Keep weeding through all of these.
Well, are you got more questions there, Olivia?
You can go ahead and continue while I find the next one.
Okay, so There were some other questions that Olivia had. The one that we were going to cover was the sprayed gel, so through the airbrush system. What was another one that popped up, Olivia?
Let's see, we do have one here. How does white and black buttercream or color gels cure when the pigments are so opaque?
So those are opaque because the certain resin selection that we use, coupled with the photoinitiators, we can get them to cure quite thickly. In our manufacturing process, we have a proprietary technique on how we formulate it so that it does a really good job. Products that contain higher monomer contents typically don't want to cure very thickly. The ones with a higher oligomer content do cure better. And so making sure we blend the proper oligomers with the proper levels of monomer is important.
Great.
So that's how we do it.
Another one of our questions was, can you over cure tack? So it's supposed to cure for 30 seconds. If you cure it for a minute, is there any reason we shouldn't do that?
Cure it. Cure it. Sometimes people are talking about, oftentimes, over-curing products. And when we talk about how to overcure, or what happens if we overcure a product, if we cure it too long, what are the effects? So overcuring can be one of two different things. One thing that we can look at for overcuring is the exothermic reaction. If the gel during the curing process generates a high amount of exothermic reaction, the higher the temperature of the gel product, the faster it's going to cure. And so if it cures very, very quickly solely due to the amount of exothermic reaction, is that a danger to your health as far as allergy goes? No, absolutely not. Is that a danger to the nail bed, the living tissue beneath the fingernail? If it gets to be a high temperature and exposed for a prolonged period of time, you can actually kill some of that tissue by cooking it. And so that should be avoided. Your clients shouldn't experience a significant amount of discomfort to that temperature over a prolonged period of time. So a lot of the curing lights on the market right now have a hard gel setting, or where the lamp flashes, or it starts off at a lower intensity and slowly ramps up to a higher intensity. Those things will help alleviate that experience. The other thing is that if you cure a gel too long, that can also be overcuring. So in the case of tack, one step, something along those lines, other than a gloss coat. If you cure it for a longer period of time, typically that's not going to cause a problem. Usually it won't cause the product to yellow, discolor, become embrittled by any means. If it does become brittle over a period of time because it's been cured too long, that would come down to the formulation, and it didn't formulate enough flexibility into that coating. And so they could look at choosing some other resins that would add that flexibility to keep it from becoming brittle, because we want that coating to be as cured as humanly possible, as close to 100% cured. And so we can do that. So you should be okay. Now, if it's super shiny, or if you're using one step for a gloss, or a P+ top coat, or anybody else's top coat that has an inhibition layer, if you cure it too long, it'll reduce that inhibition layer, which can affect its gloss. So if you cure something like super shiny, and it's supposed to be cured for a minute, but you cure it for 4 minutes, you're not going to have a high gloss. Cure it for a minute, cleanse it, get your gloss up. If you find that you don't have a good gloss at that time, try it for 30 seconds, try a minute and a half, and see which one produces the best gloss, and cure it for that period of time.
Great information. Let's see, can you create a gel that cures in any lamp? Would a gel containing every kind of photoinitiator even be possible?
So every lamp winds up being significantly different, which I'm glad you asked that question, because I have one here that someone brought to my attention, and I bought this online through Amazon. It says it has, like, I think it's, if I remember right, 268 watts of power. When I took a look at it, this one here did consume 268 watts of electricity. That's before it was at the AC-DC converter, so the part you plug into the wall. So I measured the consumption of power to operate this light, and it was right around, if I remember right, 268 watts. However, when I measure the actual irradiance from this lamp, and this comes in both chrome finish or white finish and a black finish, when I measured its output, it was at 11 milliwatts per square centimeter. So while this seems like, by the numbers, according to their advertising, a good light to cure just about every gel, its irradiance value is extremely low. So making sure that you match the right curing light with the product that you're using. So this may be perfectly acceptable for some brands, not acceptable for Light Elegance.
All right. Hoche is on here and asks, is there a different process or products we should be using during application for humid climates? There's a lot of humidity out here.
Hoche, Puerto Rico is humid, that's for sure. And I know that you guys have been using the Air Bond for your humid environment and having good success with it. One of the key things to make sure that you are successful in a humid environment is making sure that any moisture is removed from the fingernail. One key component to make sure you remove that moisture from the fingernail. Now, moisture, in my mind, is water as well as oils. So you need to make sure that you remove the water from the fingernail and the oil from the fingernail. And so cleansing those fingernails and the skin surrounding the fingernails twice is really helpful. I would do an overall cleanse of the skin around the fingernail first, and then I would cleanse just the fingernail so it's squeaky clean. So if you remove the oils and the water from the skin around the fingernail in extremely humid environments, that will help keep those from leaching onto or wicking onto the surface of the fingernail. Clean that fingernail so it's squeaky clean, and then prep that fingernail with a fresh file, and then clean it again and apply tack. And if you do it, that process, you can do a couple of fingers at a time, but you want to do it rapidly. Okay, if you start filing on the fingernail before you've cleansed the skin and the fingernail, then you're filing any oil back into the fingernail. And so we want to avoid that. The other key thing is making sure you use a good quality cleanser. Now, our cleanser is isopropanol and acetone. That's absolutely no secret at all. There's no pigment in it and there's no fragrance. So the isopropanol is 99.9% pure isopropanol. It is USP grade, which means it's suitable for any kind of medical use. Isopropanol is what we call hygroscopic. Hygroscopic means it absorbs water rapidly. And so if we expose the fingernail to the isopropanol removes the water from the fingernail. If we use something like rubbing alcohol or 90% alcohol, 90% alcohol or rubbing alcohol, which is 70% alcohol, already has water in it. So it's not hygroscopic at that point. It's already been saturated with water. And so by using something that's not our cleanser or something that is proven to be 99.9% pure IPA, then you're not going to be able to remove the water from that fingernail, and it can lead to lifting. Obviously, there in Puerto Rico, it's really humid, so water is a huge problem. So, especially if it's hurricane season, buddy.
All right, we've got a question from Jackie. She asks, what is the realistic lifespan of most gel polishes before they become unsuitable for use?
Depends upon the brand. I wish I could give you a general rule of thumb. I know that we've been at this longer than most. And so the stability of our products, we know, exceeds 10 years. We put just a general shelf life of 10 years on our products. A period after opening, which is when you open that container and remove the foil seal, or you remove that initial seal that we put on it when we pump it here. How long is it good for after that? We know that people have been using these things for 15, 20 years after they've opened it. But that requires, if we were to put a period of after opening of say 20 years, we'd have to prove all of that to the EU, so the European Union. And that testing protocol for them is very difficult, and it's something that we didn't really even want to engage in. So PAO, period after opening, is 36 months, could be as long as 20 years, and our shelf life is a minimum of 10 years. Other brands, they've had good shelf life out to 3, 5, 10 years. Some brands have shelf lives of a year or so. So it depends upon the brand, and I can't really comment on all of those. Sorry.
It's a very helpful answer though. Let's see, Katya asks, is it true that we should wipe the no wipe top coat because there might still remain some allergens?
That's a good question, Katya. So when I saw that, while we can definitely admit that there is an uncured residue on the top of the no-wipe top coats, that amount of residue is so small and so fine that it really poses no health risk whatsoever. In fact, we did a test that we thought was fair. We cured the no-wipe top coats, the most popular ones that are on the market. And then once we cured them, we wiped them with a cleansing swab, like a Q-tip. And then we exposed that Q-tip into a solvent, and then we tried to extract any material from that cleansing swab into the solvent and then run through our GCMS. Our GCMS can detect down to parts per billion, and we saw 0 parts per billion of any monomers or any resins in that system whatsoever. So what we soaked that cotton swab in afterwards showed absolutely nothing that was removed from the cotton swab. We performed the same test using something with a sticky layer, say our super shiny, cotton swab that, and yes, we did find residue that was transferred from the cotton swab into the solvent, and that was then run through the GCMS. So we know the test procedure works, and we know that the sticky residue that's on these products is so minute, it is so minuscule that there's no way we can detect it. So you guys are safe. No need for any huge alarm.
Great answer. Let's see, Tara asks, I have a client that always gets a heat spike with gel applications, hard gel, gel polish, and super shiny. If I put a layer of cool gel on her first before applying the hard gel, would that help during the whole process?
Good question. Some sort of insulation layer is always good. And so Tara, what I would do is, I think that at this point, our extreme is very, very cool, or a thin coat of Jimmy gel might be a good way to go as well. Both of those seem to have very low exothermic reactions. Cool gel used to be our lowest exothermic reaction until we reformulated everything else. When we reformulated everything, all of those exothermic reactions actually are lower than the cool gel. But a thin layer of any kind of gel will give you some insulation. And then trying to keep those layers nice and thin is crucial. And then for her, are you using the hard gel setting on the back of the light, making sure that you have like either a flashing of the LEDs or a slow increase in irradiance of the LEDs so that it reduces the exothermic reaction. If you can do those things with the thin layers, she should be fine.
Great. Charmaine asks, should we be afraid when we see all the listed ingredients on an SDS sheet and view these ingredients as toxic?
No need to be afraid. So the reason, that's a great question too, and I will cover, that's a good point. I'll cover that when I do my Chemist Corner on SDSs. But you figure people have been using these things. Like our formulations, people have been using them for 23 years on the market, plus another 2 years in the salon. And we have 5 people that have demonstrated an allergic reaction to our system in the world, not just like in the office, but everywhere. So if that's the case, then you would have a lot more problems. So if we look at the empirical value of the data, the empirical value of that data says that the products are very, very safe. A lot of them, yeah, they have really long, complex names, but those long, complex names are not indicative of the danger of the product. And sometimes being exposed to small amounts of dangerous things is fine, as long as the concentration is very, very low, because it's been diluted down in other safe ingredients. So just like when you take any kind of like medicine to help with like a fever, or if you take it to help with, I don't know, maybe you have some sort of disease or something like that, and you take these medicines in very, very low concentrations, and they've been diluted down in other chemicals, maybe it's going to be dextrose or sucrose or something else, you're fine. But if you're to take that full, say, 1,000 milligram tablet, and it's all active component, it could really put you in the hospital. So we expose ourselves to diluted chemicals all the time, and we prefer them. So, and even if you look at ethanol, right? If you drink straight ethanol, Everclear, you're really going to be hurting the next day. You can even put yourself in the hospital or die. But at lower concentrations, a nice glass of wine is great.
Can flash curing products cause wrinkling or shrinking?
No. No. Usually the wrinkling and shrinking of flash curing or even fully curing those pigmented products is because the application was too thick. So apply it thinner. And the reason why is because as the light comes down from the curing lamp, if you have a product that's really, really thick and only that top surface cures, that'll cure and shrink. It's being cured and shrinking on top of uncured material underneath. So you just need to apply it much thinner. Try going super thin. Put it on as thin as you can, and then every subsequent practice using plastic tips. Put it on a little bit thicker after each application and see at what point you start seeing that wrinkling. Okay?
Perfect.
And then once you do that, that gives you a good idea. Now, whatever that number winds up being, and again, a digital micrometer goes a long way in these situations. If you put that product on and say you start seeing it wrinkling at 20 thousandths of an inch, then you know you need to apply it at 10 thousandths, because at 10 thousandths you'll be about 50% cured on the bottom side of that product, underneath, and that'll give you sufficient adhesion, and then you'll be okay and you shouldn't have any problems.
Great information there. Can you use the Cutie Base thicker for structured manicures to fill in ridges, etc. on the nails?
Yeah, the Cutie Base is not known for being extremely strong, so I wouldn't go overboard with it, but you could do a slightly floated layer of Cutie Base, so that if you put on a thin coat and then just float a little bit over it and then fill in those ridges, you'll be all right. Another option would be a thin coat of Cutie Base and a slightly thicker coat of Jimmy Joe.
Perfect. All right, let's see. How do you know if a product is overcured?
So are we talking about overcuring because of extra long exposure? If that's the case, then that extra long exposure will decrease its gloss.
Perfect. And that's speaking about like top coats?
Top coats.
Okay.
Or some building coats that have a gloss, right? So those building coats that have a gloss, if you overcure them and the gloss is less, then you know that it's time that you wasted curing it for a longer period of time.
All right, gotta
Yeah.
save every second you can, right?
Well, and maximize your efforts.
All right. Let's see here. I have 2 older pink glitter gels who became a bit yellow looking in the jar. What happened?
Okay, so every now and then you get some pigments, because we're forced to use certain red pigments that aren't extremely stable when they're exposed to certain resins. Okay, so sometimes those pigments, because of the FDA or the EU or Asian laws, require us to not use pigments that are really stable. So we have to use these other ones that are approved for that use, and they can fade based on the resins, or they can fade based on UV exposure. So it would be, it's kind of, let me go back just a little bit, kind of like some of the bumper stickers that you see, where sometimes they say, I love, and love is a little heart. And that heart was bright red when they first got the bumper sticker, but after about 4 or 5 weeks, that heart is gone. Same thing. So you can get those reds to fade, and then you're left with whatever color was added to that red to make it that color.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right, I think that's all of our questions as of right now.
Okay.
Let's see here. Do you have anything else you want to wrap up with?
I don't think so. Just thank everybody for their time. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
I guess we should share the discount code. We have 20% off site-wide. Code SPRING20.
Or just say Jim is awesome when you check out.
Yeah, shout out to Jim. Give him a shout out when you check out. Leave
kidding.
Angela a little note.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Be sure to send in any last-minute questions you have, and we will add those to our future Chemist Corner list.
Yep.
Thank you, Jim, for your
Thank you.
time.
All right.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.